Hey everybody, Chad here. This will be my last episode of 2025. And I want to thank everyone who's tuned in to this podcast in the past year. I really appreciate you lending me your ear for a couple hours a month. I started this podcast 1 year ago in January as a part of a New Year's resolution. But as I was doing my research for this episode, I realized I think it wasn't so much of a New Year's resolution as a solstice rebirth. So thanks again for listening. Now sit back, relax, and get ready to open your mind. Was the Christmas story invented as a way of keeping humanity cosmically illiterate? Was it created to distract us from the power of this winter solstice event? And through that, stunting the evolution of humanity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
And we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us.
It would be a shift in the knowledge of humanity, a new knowledge.
What the hell is going on?
For as long as humanity's existed, we've kept track of the winter solstice. It's usually around December 21st, and it marks the shortest day and the longest night of the year. And it marks the precise moment when the Earth's northern pole is its farthest away from the sun. And the word solstice is from a Latin word, and it means literally sun stands still. Because for a few days, the sun kinda does stand still. To the naked eye, it almost pauses at its noon elevation. And then at around December 24th or 25th, it starts to get higher and higher each day. And for some reason, it's been kind of a big deal for as long as humans have ever existed. There are ancient structures littered all over this planet that line up to the summer and the winter solstice. And I think that's kind of strange. I understand why they would want to keep track of the sun. It basically helped them know what time it was and how long it would be till spring and warmer weather and crops and harvest. But why would they want to build such huge, intricate, and even megalithic structures to keep track of this? I'm sure life was hard enough back then. Like, guys, just build a sundial and be done with it already. But no, they build places like Stonehenge. Stonehenge was built in 2700 BC and earlier parts from 3000 BC. And the monument is, of course, in ruins compared to what it once was, but it still aligns towards the sunrise on the summer solstice and the sunset on the winter solstice. It was built in different phases over around 1500 years, and they use these huge stones that are up to 30 tons each, and they were from like 20 miles away. And they form an outer and an inner circle. Some of the smaller stones that are between 2 and 5 tons are from about 180 miles away. And when I look back and think about building something like that around 2 to 3,000 BC, well, I assume it must have been almost impossible, at least with my current understanding of how things worked back then. But no matter how you look at it, they did it. And my question is, why? Why did they go to the trouble of making these huge monuments? What did they think? What did they know? In Turkey, there's another strange monument. It's called Karen Tepe. It's near the now famous Göbekli Tepe. And they think that this was built around 10,000 BC. So this would basically be around 12,000 years old. And this site features circular enclosures with T-shaped pillars carved into bedrock. And in it, there's all kinds of carvings of snakes, foxes, birds, human sculptures, and phallic symbolism, if you know what that means. And on December 21st, the winter solstice, they have a sunrise alignment. And this is considered the oldest built solstice alignment in a megalithic structure. It's about 7,000 years older than Stonehenge's summer solstice alignment. And this alignment takes place in what they call the Pillar Shrine. And this is a human head carved, protruding out from this bedrock wall. If you've watched on Netflix Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse, he goes to this site and he looks at this head coming out of the wall, and it's freaky. It almost has snake-like type features. And in front of this snake-like human head coming out of the bedrock, there is a wall with a porthole in it. And on the morning of the winter solstice, around 10 minutes after sunrise, a beam of light shines on the right side of this head, and it gradually moves across the face for 45 minutes. And my question again is, why? Of course, this structure, like all of the others, it's not only built for the winter solstice. They're in alignment for summer solstice things, different equinoxes, and star alignments. But why would they go to all of that trouble? Is it like some type of time capsule? When it's built out of huge megalithic stones, it can handle all kinds of catastrophes in the earth and still be standing? Is it there for future humans to have some sense of what was going on back then? Or was it just a part of their culture and they had a perspective on reality that we have lost? Maybe it was some type of cosmic clock, something that tells you what time it is, not necessarily on Earth, but in the cycles of the universe. Kind of like a calendar for cosmic seasons. I think that it was probably all of those things at the same time. Now let's go to the island of Malta in the Mediterranean. There is a temple complex there called the Manidra. It was built about 3400 BC, and on the morning of the winter solstice, a dagger of light forms and illuminates a vertical slab, and they think it acted as a precise calendar, which I'm sure it did, but I just feel like there's something more to it than just that. Heck, even the Vatican has winter solstice alignments built into it. Its St. Peter's Square marks the solstice. There is an 83-foot tall stone obelisk, and it's like a sundial. And at noon, on the winter solstice, the tip of the obelisk's shadow touches this marble disc that's the farthest from the obelisk base. And this marks the year's longest shadow. And this was built in 1817. And this 83-foot tall obelisk that they used, they stole, of course, from Egypt. And it was stolen by the Roman Emperor Caligula in 37 AD. He transported it to Rome on a special ship, and he placed it in his own private circus. And then during the Renaissance in around 1586, they moved it to where it is now in St. Peter's Square. So even the Vatican lines up with the solstices. And they use an ancient Egyptian obelisk to do it. And again, my question is, why? Is it just for the hell of it? Did they go to all of that trouble just to make it look nice and neat? Or is there something they're not telling us? Remember, the entire planet is littered with monuments that line up to solstices. And these monuments date back to 12,000 years ago. And according to Graham Hancock, some of these ancient monuments, like Karen Tepe, kind of don't make sense. Because they are perfectly plopped in the countryside, with nothing to suggest that these monuments, Karen Tepe, was built through trial and error. He said it almost looks like something came down and built it for them. Because on other archaeological sites, you can see the remnants of them perfecting their craft and improving their skills until they finally have some cool structure to show for all of their hard work. But there is no evidence of that. And some think that it suggests that they would say like ancient aliens or some type of interdimensional being came and helped them get started, which does support the theme of, well, the Bible that has the Watchers that came down and kind of messed everything up down here. Then you have the story of the ancient Sumerians and the Anunnaki. In South America, you have Quetzalcoatl. In fact, every primitive culture of the world pretty much has a flood story and stories of gods coming down and setting them up down here. And they all paid close attention to the stars, the equinoxes, and the solstices. Yet in our modern times, the average person doesn't know anything about the stars, equinoxes, or solstices. We just save them for trivia. Maybe we'll see it as a category on Jeopardy, or a 30-second segment by the weatherman on the news. But that's it. So, in order to understand this, why don't we look back at when did this all change? When did humans stop looking to solstice events and trade that in for, really, religious mythology? Because if you think about the winter solstice, which is December 21st to around the 24th or the 25th, well, that's the same date as Christmas, the biggest holiday in the Western world. Is that just a coincidence? Well, let's have a look at the past and see where this all came from. Now, we've just gone over how the oldest ancient structures that they've found, Göbekli Tepe and Karen Tepe, that are around 12,000 years old, were built to be in alignment with the stars, summer, and winter solstice. And that there are monuments littered all over the planet that are built in alignment with the winter and summer solstices and the stars. And for thousands of years, humanity had festivals, rituals, and holidays based around these cosmic events. And basically, every culture in the world had some sort of response to the winter solstice. But of course, their understanding of what was actually going on during the winter solstice wasn't what we have today. They were not thinking in terms of axial tilt of the planet and the cosmic mechanics of the universe. They saw the sun as more of a living intelligence. Most ancient cultures believed that the sun was conscious, that it was moral and responded to human order or disorder, and also that the sun was relational to humanity, and that it required some type of recognition or ritual. And really, it was almost a worldwide view that the cosmos and society mirrored one another. There's an old ancient saying, as above, so below. So during the solstice, when the sun seemingly weakened and stayed at its lowest point for 3 days, societies all over the world would perform rituals because they basically felt that they had to participate with the cosmos in order to maintain order. And of course, they didn't have our modern understanding of time either. They didn't see time as linear, but they saw time as more of a cyclical thing, kind of like the seasons. Now that's something we've definitely lost in our modern times. So how about we have a look at how we got here? How did we get to our modern understanding that the cosmos, the alignments of the planets, and the cycles of the sun have nothing to do with humanity or society itself? Well, it all started back around 2,000 years ago-ish. You know, the same place in almost every single podcast episode I end up going back to. Things changed with the start of Christianity. Rome couldn't resist its influence, and so eventually it decided to go with it. And when I say go with it, I mean hijack it, take it over, make it mean what they want to mean, and burn, bury, and kill all evidence that says anything contrary to their new narrative. Now, this process didn't happen instantly. It happened over decades and, well, a couple centuries, really. But the ball started rolling in that direction with the Roman Emperor Constantine. In 336 AD, he announced December 25th as Jesus' birthday. And what a coincidence. It just happened to line up with the Roman winter solstice festival called Saturnalia. Now at that point, Rome had celebrated Saturnalia for around 700 years. And this was like a government-sanctioned holiday based around the solstice. And it's named after and dedicated to the god of Saturn. They saw Saturn as the god of agriculture, seed growing, abundance, and the Golden Age. And they saw the Golden Age as a time when there was perfect peace and harmony in the world, and that mortals lived like gods without sorrow or toil. Of course, that was in contrast to what they saw at the time as the Iron Age, which was sorrow and toil. But during the solstice, they saw time as temporarily broken, because on December 21st, the sun stops descending. It seemingly pauses in place for 3 days, and so they interpreted that as the natural order of nature pauses too. And in ancient thinking, they believed that society is a reflection of the cosmos. So if the natural order of the cosmos stops, like the sun for 3 days, then maybe the natural order of structured society should stop too. And that's just what they did. The most famous part of this week-long celebration was enslaved people were given temporary freedom. They didn't have to work. They could speak their minds without punishment, and even had meals served by their masters. They also had small gift exchange, and all the businesses, schools, and courts were closed. The streets were filled with feasting, drinking. Public gambling was allowed, which was normally illegal. And really, this was just a way of letting society blow off steam through an inversion of hierarchy. And some think that they did it because it was a way of ensuring they wouldn't have rebellion, kind of like a cultural pressure relief valve. But that all began to change as Rome slowly started to adopt Christianity as its state religion. So like I said, in 336, it was declared that December 25th was Jesus' birthday, and then in 380, Christianity becomes the official state religion of Rome, and pagan festivals started to be kind of restricted. Saturnalia wasn't instantly erased, but it started to become discouraged. And by around 450 AD, public Saturnalia celebrations started to fade. and Christmas officially began to take over. And society changed from observing how the cosmos is related to society itself, and they traded that in for a historical narrative. Instead of participating in some type of celestial cycle, we observe a story told by a state government structure. And through that, society became disconnected from the cycles of the cosmos. I'm sure huge empires find it a lot easier to control their subjects or societies by having them believed in fixed narratives or stories. And that gives me the image of a donkey with a carrot dangling in front of its mouth. You know, the old carrot on a stick routine. It helps distract the donkey from anything else that's going on. It focuses all its attention on getting that carrot so it keeps moving in the direction the owner wants it to. And so that makes me think, is Christmas a distraction? Is the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, the pressure of buying gifts, money, having family over for big parties and events, the joy for the little kids, and the extreme sorrow for those who have lost loved ones and are alone, the endless obligations, and the big credit card bill to pay off after the holidays? And think about it. For the religious people, you have the birth of Jesus to spend all your time celebrating. And for the non-religious people, you get Santa Claus. And many people have both. And when I look at it from this perspective, it starts to look more and more to me like a psyop, a psychological operation to distract humanity from the solstice event, to disconnect us from the fact that as above, so below is a real thing. And when I start thinking along those lines, I'm reminded of the famous interview that Bob Lazar did with George Knapp in the 80s. In that interview, Bob tells George that when he was working in Area 51, he saw a huge, thick, classified book on religion.
Extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thing. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion?
I want to go back to the religion thing. I want you to say it.
Oh, come on, that's so weird. That's a lie.
I'm not asking you to say what you believe to be a fact. I'm asking you to say what you read in a report that is distributed at what may be the most top secret facility in the world. Okay. All right.
All right, I'll say it. It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of?
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created, so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
The souls. Meaning,
well, the souls or the bodies or whatever, right? That's
meaning like we're containers for souls that they're going to use at some other point.
Right.
And that they had something to do with different prophets and biblical figures.
Yes.
Well,
that supposedly Jesus and two other beings were genetically engineered. They were implanted in people on Earth in biblical times, and their births were closely monitored. Now, just some little connections to that my wife had brought up were in the Bible. They said that the star had followed Mary wherever she went, and that all UFO sightings always start out as people, well, gee, that looks like a bright star, and in fact, they said in the Bible, the brightest star in the sky followed her where she went, and you just make little connections like that.
Okay.
I don't know what else to touch on.
I remember when I first heard that interview a few years ago. I was actually a little disturbed. It sounds kind of creepy. But from the very first time that I heard that, I felt that there's something true about it. Really, that religion is a psyop. And it's not that Jesus never existed, but the truth about his existence, what his message was, and the eventual cover-up is a real thing. And in that interview, Bob even touches on the Christmas story, but not the version I'm familiar with. I don't remember a star following Mary around, but maybe Bob saw the real version of the Christmas story. Who knows? But even the official version of the Christmas story is pretty interesting if you really look at it, because that story starts out with a star, the Star of Bethlehem. And it talks about how wise men came from far away, following that star. And it calls them magi. They came to Jerusalem, and they wanted to speak with Herod, the king of Jerusalem. And they told Herod that they believed that that star signifies that a great king is about to be born. And then Herod has a panic attack, and he sets some decree out where they have to kill everyone 2 years old and under. And Mary and Joseph have to flee and have Jesus in secret and then go to Egypt. It's all an ordeal. But what I find interesting about that story is the wise men. Many scholars agree that the wise men, or magi, which is a word that refers specifically to a priestly class from Persia, who were known to be specialists with astronomy, stars, planets, cycles, and cosmic order. And that's very interesting because the dominant religion in Persia at the time was something called Zoroastrian. And wouldn't you know it, the Zoroastrians just happened to be experts in astronomy. And in their religion, they had an expectation of a coming savior. They had an idea that there would be some type of cosmic sign, a world-renewing savior, and some type of moral restoration. And that's what they were looking for when they followed that star to Jerusalem. So their religion preserved cosmic knowledge. And through their cosmic literacy, they were able to understand what time it was. And when they traveled to King Herod in Jerusalem to let him know what time it was, it caused him to panic. Because cosmic literacy disrupts empires. And I think that that is the real lesson here. That as above, so below. That the earth and society itself is a mirror of what happens in the cosmos. That we are connected. And there are cycles of death and rebirth. And the powers that be, their only hope of staying in power for as long as they possibly can is to disconnect humanity from cosmic literacy and to keep us distracted from looking up at the sky and instead follow the government-approved storyline. And I think that's why we have no idea what Stonehenge was actually for. Nobody has any idea why they built the pyramids or the Sphinx or what's really going on with them. They're just not sure. And I think that's why they're also not super interested in digging stuff up around the pyramids and around the Sphinx. They're also not interested in digging stuff up at Göbekli Tepe and Cairn Tepe. And in fact, most, if not all, megalithic structures around the world they're just not interested in taking a closer look at. And I think it's because there is a cosmic cover-up that's slowly being revealed to us. And I think it's getting pretty hard to ignore, especially considering all the wacky stuff that's happened in the sky the past couple years. With the solar maximum that we've been in for the past year or so, with whatever's going on with the Atlas 3I comet, the shifting of Earth's magnetic poles, and the northern lights being seen all the way down into Florida and Texas. Plus, in April of 2024, there is a solar eclipse, and I happen to live in the path of totality. So I came home early from work that day, started a campfire in the backyard, and my family and I watched as the sun went dark. We stood out in the field behind my house, and we could see the stars at like 3 in the afternoon. It was powerful. Of course, a modern day person sees that solar eclipse and thinks, wow, that's really neat. I wonder what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say about it. But someone who's cosmically literate, they would see that solar eclipse and they would understand that the sun represents visible authority, rulers and leaders in the earth. And they would see the moon as a representation of the feminine or hidden forces and the collective unconscious. So you could interpret that the sun being overshadowed by the moon as what's hidden beneath the surface will become visible. And when you look at the chaos that's been unfolding in the world since 2020, really, the crumbling of government structures and ideologies. Plus, there's no shortage of hidden things being revealed and coming to light. Take the Epstein list, for example. And we haven't even begun to see what that's actually all about. But I think it may unravel the fabric of reality itself. Now, you don't need to be cosmically literate to understand that something's going on right now. But by being cosmically literate, you could understand that these are part of cycles. And that through understanding that, we can surf this cosmic wave that's coming instead of being crushed by it. And I think that's just what the winter solstice is actually for. A time to reflect on our own lives, on the Groundhog Day cycles that we've been stuck in and struggling to get out of. And maybe winter solstice is a time when we can do what they did 12,000 years ago, and that we can quietly breathe with the planet. And maybe when the sun begins to return again, we will be born again.